help you once again going forward. I know in the last video I initially said that I was going to talk about all the major scales, and I still am, but this information will help you understand how I even came up with the fact that there are major scale names and all that stuff to begin with. So the musical alphabet, if you can remember, starts on A, goes through G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, like our regular alphabet, and then starts again at A. It doesn't include the rest of the how many ever notes we have left, or letters we have left in our regular alphabet. But what it does include is something called sharps and flats, which are either the regular notes of the musical alphabet raised to sound slightly higher, or lowered to sound lower, actually. That's pretty much what it is. And so the regular music alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, has no sharps, no flats, means it has no changes to it. That's what it sounds like. If I add a half step above that, or above one of the notes to raise it, then it creates a completely different note. And so now we have to add that note to our musical alphabet as well. So if I start on A, and I'll raise it a half step, which is now introducing all of our black keys, it's slightly higher in terms of sound than the first note. I'm thinking about the different ways that we can say that, because higher could also mean volume, but we're not talking about volume in this case. We're talking about pitch, or the tone. This note is slightly higher in pitch than the note we started. And because we raised the pitch, we now consider that a sharp. And we're only raising the pitch by a half step. So now, if we start on A and raise the pitch a half step, we get A sharp. So now we're including A sharp in our musical alphabet. The next note would be D. Then we're going to raise that. That gets us to C. Yes, B sharp is a thing, but I'll explain that in a different video. Currently, you need to know that B to C is a half step. We're going to raise C another half step, so we get C sharp. Then we're going to go to D, raise D a half step. We're going to get D sharp. We go E. E to F is similar to B to C, and again, I'll explain later why that makes sense. And yes, there is an E sharp, but again, I'll explain why that makes sense. So we're on F, we're going to raise that a half step, F sharp, we're going to go to G, raise that a half step, get G sharp, and then we're back where we very first started, just higher in pitch, A, because now that's the end of our musical alphabet. So we started on A and ended on A, just like we would in our regular musical alphabet. Now, since we started on the top, and there's one more set of things that we've got to introduce, which are called flats. They're the opposite of the sharps in this case, which would be decreasing the note by half the pitch. So if we go backwards, we get, that's a few ways to think about that. But if we start on A and we go backwards, we now have an A flat, because we're lowering it. So it keeps the same name, just add a sharp or flat for its relationship to the first note. How does it sound? It's lower than the note we started on. So A flat, G, as you can guess, goes G flat. We're down to F. The same rule applies for the flats as it does for the sharps. There is an F flat, but I'll explain how that makes sense later on. So for now, just know F to E, E to E flat, we drop down to D, D to D flat, we drop down to C, probably looking at it and going, well, you played the same thing when you went to the sharps, and then when you went to the flats, all you did was go down, but you changed the name. That's because some of the notes, all the black keys, in a rare situation with those B and C and E and F, are considered something called enharmonics. They have different names, but they sound the same. So if I play starting at our A, and I go up, if you remember, that's a half step above A, so we get an A sharp, and then I go to the next note B. But if I play B and I go down, I've decreased the pitch by a half step from B to B flat, and it's the exact same note that I played when I played for A sharp. So depending on the scale, it determines whether we're using a sharp or a flat. And we'll know if we're using sharps or flats because if you remember when we talked about the keys, the key will tell you where the starting note is. So if I say I'm in the key of A, and I didn't say A major or A minor or anything like that, I can guess, I haven't learned it, but you can certainly guess that there probably is major, and somewhere along the lines you can guess that there is a sharp note in it because of how it sounds. If you are designated that this is the key of B flat, then you start on a B flat, and now whether you go up or down the scale, all of your notes are going to be considered flat if you have to play a flat note. The major scales that have sharp notes usually keep the same name as what they start on, other than saying A sharp. So yeah, let's just write that out so you have a better understanding of what I'm saying. If I say I'm in the key of A, as a musician, I'm aware that there are sharp notes in there. But we don't say key of A sharp, because technically that's something different. But if I say the key of B flat, and I don't have to write flats, this little sign or symbol right there tells me that there's a flat sound. And the sharps are the pound sign. So if I say that I'm in the key of B flat, then I'm aware that if I have a note that fits in that spot, that it's going to be flat and it's not going to be sharp. So we don't use sharps and flats in the same scale, technically, except for one scale, which is a scale that I got written on here, which is the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale is just whatever note you start on, and you play all the notes. So I've shown it to you already. So we started on A, I'm just going to play all the notes all the way up until I get to A, all 12 notes. And then I'll just go back down, all 12 notes. With the addition of sharps and flats, as you've heard me say, it gives you 12 additional notes. And so now the musical alphabet has this brand new flavor to it, which also helps us create the scales that we want to talk about. So utilizing all 12 of those notes, plus the major scale formula, it tells me that now I'll have some notes that are black keys. Because if I kept playing the same arrangement of no black keys at all, I'll only be able to play two scales. The C major scale or the A minor scale.